a series of well-attended lectures were delivered over 2 days at the Business Design Centre in London. The speakers included authors of best-selling books such as Graham Hancock, Robert Bauval and John Anthony West. The topics range from the search for extraterrestrial life to mankind's ancient history, and the assembled lecturers presented ideas and theories, many of which challenged the orthodox views held by the scientific establishment, be they Egyptologists or even organizations such as NASA in the United States. In the last few years, interest in these themes in the media and amongst the public at large has dramatically increased. However, this event was the first of its kind where speakers of such caliber gathered to present their carefully researched findings. These findings confront the academic establishment with alternative yet scientific theories. Frequently, these established dogmas are based on erroneous interpretation of the available data, and furthermore, uncomfortable facts that do not conform with the established paradigms are often ignored. The conference no doubt clarified many points, but almost certainly posed many other questions. It was the first of a series of events which will include field trips to Egypt and Mexico in order to bring the lectures to life by directly experiencing the locations, monuments and objects discussed in the lectures. The first of these field trips to Egypt will take place in November of this year, and the event will be documented on video, which will be reviewed at the Manchester conference in December.
We have Robert and then Graham introducing Keeper of Genesis, their new book. Robert?
Thank you.
Bonjour. Oh, hang on.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers, Dave Good of Amateur Astronomer magazine, who's sponsoring the venue, and Roy Bird. But most of all, I'd like to thank you all for getting up on Sunday at such an early, ungodly date. I know some people in the crowd here consider Sunday starting at about 11 o'clock, some of my friends here. So thanks for coming. So let's start immediately. We're a bit late, so I'll start immediately with the mysteries of the pyramids. Hello? What's that? Dave. That's the tray for the Mayan mysteries. Who put the tray there? So I'm putting you like this. Please sit down. No, it's okay. I showed this photograph to a friend archaeologist. And I said, what do you think of it? And he looked at it, turned it around, and said, I think it's a very poor replica of a Mexican carpet. I said, you're wrong. He said, I can't be far wrong. I said, you're very, very wrong. Way out. I'll tell you what this is. I'll have to read it because it's rather technical. This is the Arecibo interstellar message. On November 16, 1974, a radio signal was transmitted from Arecibo Observatory to the globular cluster M13, about 25 light years away from the Earth. The signal contained 1,679 bits of information. Now, 1,069 is the product of two primary numbers, 73 times 23. This would suggest to an intelligent people that the bits should be arranged in rows of 73 against 23. The result is the picture you see. Now, the top row provides a counting convention. The second establishes the atomic number of the chemicals which we're made of: hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and phosphorus. The green and blue-white blocks in the middle give information on the genetic and DNA coding of the human creature in red here. And to the left and right of the creature are the population count in 1974 and the average height of the creature. The yellow block provides information of the creature's planetary system, with the Earth slightly offset the third planet, to draw attention. And the lower design here shows the radio telescope giving dimensions and size. So to put it very mildly, the Mexican artwork replica theory of my learned archaeologist was very wrong indeed. Let us look at the same problem the other way around. Now in this case we know what we see. It is the so-called interstellar record put on the Voyager probe launched to the stars in 1977. What you see here is the cover of the records with information on it how to play it, and also some basic coordinates from where it came from. The record contains information on the thoughts, beliefs, science and technology of the human race in 1977. It is designed to last 1,000 million years. Now suppose that this was found 1 million years from now on this planet by the equivalent of my friend the archaeologist. Assume, of course, that the human race is still here and hasn't destroyed itself with the Holocaust. Our futuristic archaeologist, not having the faintest clue what this golden object is, will study it from his own viewpoint, then probably send it to the nearest museum with the following tag: cult object, used for symbolic purpose, probably in ceremonial burial rituals. Way off the mark. Has something like this happened to the Great Pyramids and the Sphinx of Giza? Could a tomb only for megalomaniac pharaohs theory put on these monuments by our learned archaeologists and Egyptologists be completely and utterly off the mark as well? Could it be that these monuments bear a message, a salient message, as important and as precise as the Arecibo or the Voyager interstellar message on the origins of an intelligent race? A race not from outside our planetary system, but from right here on Earth. In short, could the Giza necropolis be a Genesis book in stone, carefully structured by highly advanced people who perhaps knew where we came from and who we are? Could we be looking here at the keeper of Genesis, waiting patiently for the archaeologists and Egyptologists to finish with their probing and pussyfooting and moving away, so that others, researchers, more equipped and more receptive to the notion of a space-time message that these monuments might bear, have at long last their chance to decode them? Well, we think so. Someone once said that architecture is frozen music. These extraordinary monuments at Giza are perhaps not just frozen music, but more especially frozen memory. Let us now show you how to unfreeze them from their archaic memory banks and bring it back to life again. What you see here is the Giza necropolis, the 3 Great Pyramids, seen from the air from 2 kilometers above. I will dispense with the background of pyramid construction, mainly because we don't have the time, and mainly because it's all in our books that we have written so far. There are about 25 Great Pyramids in Egypt. They were built around the period of 2800 BC to about 2200 BC. Out of these 25 so-called Great Pyramids, there is no doubt at all that the Giza necropolis stands out, dominant, above the rest. To give you an idea of the scale that you're looking at here, In this slide, somewhere here, is the Great Sphinx of Giza. I'll spare you the agony of trying to find it. Here it is. A dinky toy next to gigantic man-made mountains. The Sphinx is by no means a dinky toy. It is as long as a city block, as high as a 15-story building. There are people in this slide. There are in fact buses. One here. That is the scale of this site. 15 million tons of material have been moved at the dawn of our civilization, we are told, by people who did not have any form of technology other than human force and pieces of stick, and raised these monuments there for us to still see them, and they will be there for generations to come when our civilization has disappeared. It is a duty that we have to try and interpret them rather than quickly dispense them as tombs. The first thing that you realize with these monuments is that they bear very, very powerful astronomical aspects. As you will see, they are the Swiss watch of architecture, optician's precision, done by people who were definitely not primitives, but people who understood the motions of the sky and of the stars especially. On this picture, you see my enterprising co-author and myself, Graham Hancock, on top of the Great Pyramid. This picture was taken on the 22nd of March this year. We were very keen to be standing there so that we could observe the effect that the sun has on the pyramids and the Sphinx on the spring equinox, the 22nd of March. But mainly this picture shows you the sort of gigantic and magical scale of this place and the sort of incredible quality. I mean, you're looking at monuments here that are at least 4,500 years old, standing, and they would have been, incidentally, almost perfectly as they had been built originally, were it not for earthquakes that shattered some of their casing blocks, but mainly in the 11th and 12th century, the Arabs who stripped the casings to build modern Cairo. But they're still there for us to see and to measure and to examine. Apart from their scale, what is really astounding about these monuments is the precision to which they were built. You're looking here at some of the original casing blocks. The block that you see here weighs approximately 25 tons. Perfectly aligned, even after 4,500 years maintaining its perfect alignment. And these so-called casing blocks cover the pyramid all the way to the apex with uncanny precision, maintaining a perfect slope and a perfect alignment. Imagine yourself directly above the Great Pyramid, looking from a distance of approximately 2 kilometers. The apex of the pyramid. Now what is incredible about this particular monument is that the base, which occupies 13 acres, carpeted with blocks that weigh 2 tons apiece, over a side distance of 230 meters, a quarter of a kilometer. Were you to walk around the pyramid, you'd be walking almost a kilometer. What is astounding is that it is set perfectly square, but not just perfectly square, but perfectly aligned to the cardinal points. This face facing due east, due south, due west, and due north. And as you will see, the emphasis of this alignment is along what we call the meridian axis, the north-south axis of the pyramid. You can only achieve this sort of alignment even today by the observation, the very accurate observations of the passage of the stars at their culmination at the meridian. Clearly, the emphasis is north-south and the meridian. The entrance of the pyramid is on the north face. The visitor will progress downwards to a subterranean chamber below, then through an ascending corridor leading to a grand gallery, a horizontal corridor leading to the so-called Queen's Chamber, which has been the subject, by the way, of a lot of media attention, as you will be reminded a bit later on, and up to the King's Chamber, with so-called air shafts, which, as you will see, are not air shafts at all, but sterilely aligned shafts, all along a meridional or north-south direction. Why? Now, having established that the direction that these people were obsessively trying to fix their monuments along, this north-south axis, here's the Great Pyramid with its entrance in the north, and the north-south meridional axis. What puzzled me about 15 years ago is that having done that accurate alignment to the meridian, they placed two other monuments along a diagonal, 45 degrees to the meridian. What puzzled me even more is that the third pyramid was offset to the left of this diagonal. Now, it was obvious to me, as it should be obvious to anybody who knows. Indeed, we don't need to know about architecture or engineering. It looks like these monuments, similar monuments on a similar site, are laid according to a plan. Therefore, what was the purpose of the plan? Why the strange anomalistic layout with the offset of the third pyramid? For example, why not lay them along the meridional axis which they so obsessively set out for the first pyramid? Or why not, at least, if for some reason unknown to us, wanted to maintain a 45-degree diagonal, not place the third pyramid along that alignment? There is another bizarre question that we can ask here, is why a third, smaller pyramid when we have two of the same size, or almost the same size? Now, we're told by Egyptologists that the kings who built these monuments were egocentric, powerful, megalomaniac, wanted to mobilize the whole nation in order to build themselves tombs for posterity that will last forever and forever, and for everyone to see, for generations to come, how powerful and grand they were. Well, if that's the case, I would not like to be the architect of the builder of the third pyramid and saying, sorry, dear Pharaoh, but you're not as powerful as your two predecessors, and we're going to build you a much smaller pyramid. In fact, the third pyramid is not really small. It towers 65 meters above the ground. It contains 250,000 tons of material. Were you to see that pyramid in isolation, it is a very large monument. However, parking it, as it were, next to the two giants, it is dwarfed. The impression that one gets is whoever built it must have had less resources, less labor, less will. Why would he want to advertise that for posterity if he was such a powerful pharaoh? Could it be that it isn't a pharaoh who built it, but many pharaohs? or rather, perhaps, during the reign of a pharaoh, maintaining an overall plan. The pharaoh who built this third pyramid was not building his pyramid. He was completing a plan. If you see it in this light, these anomalistic questions that do not fit the orthodox view begin to give us a clear picture. You can see very clearly this bizarre misalignment of the 45 degree with the small pyramid. Here on a larger scale, pretty obviously a plan. Monuments of the same design, built presumably by the same people, on the same site, but with this strange anomalies. Now, another strange thing about these pyramids. They do not bear any inscriptions. Zero. Nada. Nothing. Not one word. This doesn't quite work with the image of megalomaniac, egocentric pharaohs who wanted everybody to know that they had built these pyramids, that they were all powerful. If you were one of these megalomaniac pharaohs who had built the greatest monument ever, had mobilized your country for 20, 30 years to raise this monument to your glory, would you leave everyone guessing who built it and why? I would not. Graham Hancock and myself are launching a book today. I don't think we would like it very much if our publisher forgot to put our names on the cover. So why no inscriptions? Why nothing written? Had they nothing to say? I think they had a lot to say. We are looking at the wrong form of expression. These people obviously were aligning their monuments to stars with this obsessive precision, not just for the fun of it and making their life complicated, but because they spoke in a scientific language, a language that can transcend cultures, transcend time, a language that all of us, no matter where we come from, will understand. Another mystery. Nothing was ever found in these pyramids. Nothing was ever found in the Great Pyramid. Totally bare corridors, tunnels, chambers, except for what Egyptologists call a sarcophagus, a coffer. Where is King Cheops, who built this pyramid? Where are his remains, his treasures, his artifacts, his labor force, his tools? Nowhere to be found. Aha! That doesn't bother our Egyptologist friends. We have found King Cheops, they said. We found a statue of King Cheops 600 miles from the Great Pyramid. What statue? Here it is. You're seeing a very enlarged statue of presumably King Cheops, who built a 6.5 million ton monument. It's very enlarged. Actually, it's about this size. That wraps it up, say the Egyptologists. Why do you ask those questions? Another mystery. Having acquired this marvelous technology to build these marvelous gigantic monuments aligned to the stars with this kind of precisions, the fifth dynasty that followed, the pyramid builders of Giza, suddenly built these shoddy, smaller pyramids, hardly looking like pyramids at all. In fact, here is one of the remains here, hardly distinguishable as a pyramid, looking like a collapsed sand dune. What happened? Egyptologists tell us some sort of religious change. Why? Was there a pharaonic stock market collapse? Was there a pharaonic brain drain? They ran out of labor, stones? No. So what happened? In any case, one thing definitely happened. You're looking at two gentlemen, French. Here is Gaston Maspero, an archaeologist who was working under this gentleman here called Auguste Mariette, the first director of the Antiquity Department of Egypt. He seemed to bear the same characteristics as our present Antiquity Department presidents, as you will see at the end of this lecture. He seems to know everything about Egypt. Because when Gaston Maspero heard the rumor that a workman had entered these dilapidated 5th dynasty and 6th dynasty pyramids and had reported that they were full of inscriptions, Gaston Maspero immediately went to Auguste Mariette and said, let's open these pyramids. Auguste Mariette said, what for? Because I've heard that they're full of texts. Finally, we're going to find out what these pyramid builders had in mind. No, he said, these pyramids have never been found with texts in them. The great pyramids of Giza do not contain texts. All the pyramids, therefore, do not contain texts. We shall not open them. They had to wait for this gentleman to die, so finally they could open the 5th and 6th dynasty pyramids. And when they did, here is one of them, by the way, the pyramid of Unas, that is usually open to the public, closed at the moment for repair. They found that they contained masses and masses of hieroglyphic inscriptions. Suddenly, unlike the 4th dynasty pyramids, which were bereft of inscriptions, but perfectly aligned to the stars, these pyramids were speaking in a different way, but probably of the same thing. They were speaking with allegorical, symbolic, from the bottom to the top of the walls, full of inscriptions. As a matter of fact, 4,000 lines of inscriptions, enough to fill 2/4 volumes, that thick, of inscriptions of what these pyramid builders had in mind. Well, one thing, you don't need to understand the inscriptions to realize very, very quickly, as you look at the ceiling, that what they had in mind were the stars. Stars everywhere. It was as if this allegorical language of the hieroglyphics was veiling behind it an astronomical scientific language of their predecessors. It was as if, on the one hand, in the 4th dynasty, you had an Einstein or a Newton expressing himself in scientific terms using astronomy. And on the other side, with the 5th pyramid builders, you had the Pope trying to interpret the scientific language in religious form. But in any case, they were that close to each other, and they were saying the same thing. What did they say? Well, they speak of the creation myth, the creation that founded the Egyptian civilization. I'll have to take you very briefly through the so-called Osirian myth. They believed that a long, long time ago, the supreme universal deity called Atum manifested himself in the form of a couple. In turn, this couple created the sky goddess and the earth god, and from the womb of the sky goddess came these stellar deities in human form, 4 of them, principally Osiris and his sister consort Isis, and were sent down to earth to establish civilization, in Egypt according to the cosmic laws of the gods. Osiris set up court in Egypt, a kingdom of the gods, ruled by his side, by his consort Isis. However, we have a sort of Hamlet situation here, where the evil brother of Osiris, this strange-looking deity called Set, murdered Osiris, cut his body into many, many pieces, and scattered them all over the land. Isis, still without child, without a heir to the kingdom of the gods that Osiris had established, this kingdom of the beginning, gathered all the pieces of the body of Osiris, brought them back, reconstituted the body in the form of what we call a mummy. Osiris is the first mummy. Long enough for him to resurrect, become alive again, for her to take his seed in the form of a kite or a falcon, and she eventually gave birth to a son called Horus, the son of Osiris. Every pharaoh that ruled Egypt believed himself to be a reincarnation of Horus. They were Horus kings. And meanwhile, and here we get to the meaty part, Osiris departed in the heavens towards the stars and established a kingdom, we are told in these texts, in the constellation of Orion. Here are the famous three-belt stars, and here below is the star Sirius, the star of Isis. Along the banks of the celestial river, which they tell us was a counterpart of the Nile. In short, a kingdom of Osiris of Egypt in the sky, established for future Horus kings to join their original ancestors. Hence this idea of the stars. We know this because that is exactly what the pyramid texts tell us. That the king, after his death, becomes a star and becomes a companion of Orion and joins Osiris in the, well, netherworld, usually translated by the Egyptologist, afterworld. Sometimes you'll hear the underworld. It was nothing of the sort. It was a sky region in the constellation of Orion, which the Egyptians themselves called the Duat. They gave it the name of the Duat, mysteriously named Duat, a region where the souls of Horus kings were to establish themselves with their original ancestors. And they have a very mysterious name for the center of the Duat. They call it Rostau. In any case, what attracted my attention was the fact that these Horus kings, when they died, were imagined to become Osiris. We know that from the rituals, that they were mummified and underwent the same treatment as Osiris for their soul to depart or journey to the constellation of Orion. But here is what attracted my attention, that the pyramids was not only identified to the Osirianized king, but to the pyramid and Osiris. We have here king equals Osiris equals pyramid. and Osiris equals Orion. Could that explain why the Giza necropolis pyramids, the great three pyramids, had stellar alignments, and might explain the strange anomaly of the plan? Well, the first idea that these pyramids had stellar connections, much more than just astronomical alignments with the base, came in 1963 when an Egyptologist called Alexander Badawi, who was at the time living in the United States and teaching at the University of California, had the hunch that the so-called air shafts that you see here emanating directly south, these two emanate south, and these two northwards towards the meridian, were not air shafts at all. Being himself trained in architecture and being an Egyptologist, he was first asking the logical question, why would you need to ventilate a dead body? The second question is, even if they had this idea in mind, why have inclined shafts? Because although Egyptologists refer to these shafts as simple openings leading to the outside of the pyramid in the case of the king's shafts and stopping somewhere unknown from the queen's chamber shafts, they are not simple openings. They are very complicated constructions. To build an opening in a monument that is solid masonry on the incline over 90 meters long in this direction is a nightmare. It is a bit like building a chimney shaft across this building on the incline. The architect would smile and call an ambulance and say, you are totally mad. There is no need to do that because it's easier to go vertically up. Well, in this case, if you want ventilation without all these problems of constructions and dressing the stones and keeping the incline, all you have to do is leave a gap in one of the courses of the masonry and you will fulfill that function. So clearly these people wanted them inclined, wanted them heading towards the meridian where the stars culminate, and the reasonable conclusion was that they had stellar alignments. Well, not surprisingly they had, because he invited Virginia Trimble to work with him, and Virginia Trimble, being an astronomer at the time, an undergraduate, today one of the most prominent astronomers in the United States, immediately realized that the northern shaft was angled at about 30 degrees, knowing that the latitude of the site was 30 degrees. This meant to her very quickly that the northern shaft was aligned to the celestial pole. It was stellarly aligned to the pole star at the time. But what about the southern shaft? What stars could they be aligned to? Well, Badawi said, look, these people are really keen about Orion. They really want to get there, these people who build these pyramids. Well, let's try Orion, she said. And not surprisingly, she found that the shaft of the king's chamber, pointing southwards, pointed directly to the center of Orion's belt at the time that the Egyptologists estimated the pyramids to have been built, in 2450 BC. And they concluded that the shafts were sort of symbolic contraptions to direct the soul of the king to his afterlife destiny among the stars, very precisely to the heartland of this Duat, or kingdom of Osiris, and very precisely to the low star of Orion's belt. 3 pyramids, 3 stars. Anyway, they left it at that. This is symbolically what they probably had in mind. A shaft pointing to the center of Orion, the landscape in the sky of Osiris. And I came along and discovered that the lower shaft, the shaft in the Queen's chamber, pointing south, pointed to Sirius, the consort of Isis. Clearly it wasn't a coincidence. Clearly these pyramids were not mute, they were speaking in very eloquent terms, in scientific language, about the purpose or destiny of the Horus kings. In case some of you are wondering how we came to those conclusions and why we needed astronomers, is that the stars move or appear to move in the landscape of the sky due to a phenomena called precession. In the audience today is a gentleman who I've met yesterday, a very nice man, who will tell us about precession in greater detail this afternoon. And he said, it takes a long time to explain this. His name is John Lash. Can't see him anywhere, but I made a bet with him that we can explain precession in 30 seconds. What is precession? Precession is the effect of a little wobble of our planet. Our planet, this thing we're on, wobbles. It doesn't simply revolve, rotate on its axis in 24 hours, where we get the day and night. It doesn't simply revolve around the sun, as we know, in 365 days to give us the seasons. It wobbles as well. It has a third motion. And this wobble, without much ado, causes the stars to go up and down, or appear to cause the star to go up and down, when you observe them at the meridian, in a cycle of 26,000 years. And what you're seeing here is the full cycle of Orion's belt. In the current precessional cycle, it started in 10,500. This is where it was at the time the pyramids were built, and this is roughly where it will be at the end of our millennium, closing the cycle and returning back to close the 26,000 year cycle. 35 seconds, John. I hope it isn't so complicated as that. That's all we need to know. The stars go up and down in a cycle of 26,000 years. So if you know that these pyramids were built by people who wanted to link them to Orion, and you know, you calculate precession, you will find that, lo and behold, they lock in with these stars at the approximate date that Egyptologists had come. So it looks all very nice and neat. Here is schematically what they had in mind. The three pyramids, our pyramid here, the Great Pyramid, aligned perfectly along the meridian axis, shooting from the King's Chamber, aimed at Orion's belt, marked by this red blob here, the low star in Orion's belt. It seemed as if they were linking the pyramid cosmically to some sort of landscape in the sky that they believed they had to journey to. Landscape in the sky. A Nile in the sky, an Osirian landscape in the sky formed by the stars, Osirian kings being taken to pyramids. As I looked at this sky map, on and on, my mind began to formulate a blurred and nagging holographic image. I began to see something else in the sky. And I was beginning to think, pyramids. Was I going cuckoo? Was there something wrong in my way of thinking? And then I thought of comparing the two landscapes. Clearly, the Orion constellation on the banks of the Celestial River seemed to form a similar image as the star pyramids on the ground next to the sacred river of the Nile. Was that a coincidence? I thought, let's have a look and see if they can explain this very strange anomaly. The offset of that little pyramid, which I could not find any answer to. Here is an enlarged photograph of the belt stars, the Orion's belt. taken by the Lowell Observatory, and this is the low star, Zeta Orionis, where the shaft of the Great Pyramid pointed to. I drew a line, a diagonal line, across the stars, and clearly we had two stars of equal size or of equal magnitude, with a third smaller star offset from the diagonal. And I clicked. I thought, my God, these people have built their heaven on earth. They've built us a holographic, three-dimensional form of Orion's belt on the ground. If this was a coincidence, we were looking at 1,000,000 to 1 coincidence. So I decided to publish a paper. The minute that paper was published, I was called a heretic. I was called a crank. It seemed to all make sense to me. We had pyramids built by pharaohs who wanted to journey to the constellation of Orion. We had a shaft proved to be directed to the belt of Orion, more precisely this star. And we had that correlation. It could not be a coincidence. Coincidences do not work like this for me. This is more or less what they had in mind, locking a landscape on the ground, which they believe to be the cosmic resting place of their kings, to its equivalent in the sky, in an attempt to create a stargate, perhaps, a gateway to the stars. What made this almost certain was that the central region of the Osirian landscape, the Duat, was called Rostau, as you will remember. And not surprisingly, the ancient Egyptians called the Giza necropolis Rostau. Rostau on the land, Rostau in the sky, linked by a shaft and having exactly the same configuration. No coincidence. But there was a problem. I didn't realize that problem till many, many years later, and hence my involvement with Graham Hancock. I was so taken by the Egyptologists that the pyramids were built in 2500 BC that I didn't ask an obvious question. How did they get all this technology? How suddenly, out of nowhere, these people come up with this science, with this knowledge of astronomy? And then I began to think, wait a minute. If I was to study today the construction of a Gothic cathedral, yes, I would be right if I came to the conclusion that the cathedral was built somewhere around the 14th century of our era. Chartres Cathedral, all these Gothic cathedrals, roughly around that date. I would be fairly accurate. Were I to conclude that the ideas that they express, that the religion that they're built on suddenly sprang in the 14th century, I would be entirely wrong. They are referring to a time long before they were built. They are referring to a genesis. They are referring to the time of Jesus. As these pyramids were referring to the time of Osiris, the time when he came, the time of the gods long before they were built. Having asked this question, I began to look with Graham Hancock at something odd. When the stars crossed the meridian in 2500 BC, although the images were the same, the sky image was out of kilter. It was not at 45 degrees as it should be, but at 75 degrees. We had people who were extremely accurate in their alignment, to a point of obsession. Surely they would have not put the pyramids out of alignment with the stars that they linked them to. So why were the stars in the wrong place at the meridian? Or was it possible that they weren't in the wrong place at all? that they were at the wrong time? Was there a time when these stars would lock with the pattern on the ground? Now, this word beginning, the beginning of time, the Genesis, the Egyptians constantly refer to this. Everything was related to the time of the gods. Everything the Pharaoh did. Indeed, he was a reincarnated Horus, maintaining the rule of the first time of the gods. They had a name for it. They call it Zep Tepi, literally meaning the first time. The first time of Osiris. Osiris was the constellation of Orion. Do the stars have a first time? They do. They do if you consider precession. If you consider precession, they will have a first time when they are the beginning of the cycle of our current cycle. So when was this first time of Orion? Here is a simulated picture with a computer putting the 3 stars of Orion's belt. Shown here is a protractor. The angle you see here is the angle of the pyramid at 45 degrees at the epoch of 2500 BC, at the time that the pyramids were built. But if you go to the first time of Osiris, Orion, if you go to a date when it began its cycle of 10,500 BC, that's what you get. The lock. Were these monuments a sort of memorial, a sort of frozen memory of the genesis of the time of Osiris? Were the pyramid builders trying to lure us, to attract our attention to what they considered their beginning? In case you haven't quite got it, I need to emphasize this very, very strongly, because it is very relevant to the talk that Graham will follow immediately afterwards. Here are the stars of Orion as they appear in 2500 BC. A bit too slanted to make the perfect match with the pyramids on the ground. Here is the Milky Way representing the Nile, a little bit too slanted as well to represent the Nile, which runs along the meridian axis. But if you go to the beginning, to the first time of Orion's precessional cycle in 10,500 BC, the sky suddenly rotates to uncannily giving us the perfect match with the pyramids on the ground, a 45-degree alignment of the 3 stars and the Milky Way running on a north-south axis, linking itself up with the river on the ground. Here is how it would have been seen using a bit of imagination and twisting images in the right way. Here is an actual picture of Orion, and here are the belt stars, twisted round so that it would show their position at the meridian axis as they cross the meridian in 2500 BC, when the pyramids were built, with the Milky Way slanted. But if you would position them in the image that they must have had in 10,005, lo and behold, they twist round and they lock with their features on the ground. That's what happens. Here are the stars today at the time of the Pyramid Age, and they twist round and lock with precision with the image on the ground. We followed a logic. Osiris is Orion. Osiris is the god of the beginning. The stars have a beginning. We bring them to their beginning, and lo and behold, they lock with the rostau on the ground and the rostau of the duat in the sky. But, knowing my Egyptological friends, the first thing they would say is, coincidence. Coincidence. These people were not really doing that. But let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Here is, in fact, again, to emphasize the point, the three pyramids on the ground, the Rostau, the Osirian Rostau on the ground at a 45-degree alignment with the offset. But here are their equivalents in the sky, the Rostau in the sky, slanted at 45 degrees at 2500 BC. Whereas bring them down to their first time and they lock. The first indication that this was not a coincidence, although it never crossed my mind that it was that here on the south side of the third pyramid are three pyramids which appear to be a model or reduced scale of the three pyramids, the three larger pyramids running at 45 degrees. But unlike the alignment of these were set at on an east-west axis, running on an east-west axis. Three stars on the edge of a sacred landscape designed to mimic the sky, which incidentally was called the horizon by the ancient Egyptians. It was as if they were designing a mini cosmic world on the ground. And with three little pyramid stars on the edge of the horizon, somewhere 27 degrees west of the center of the whole design. Not surprisingly, they were positioned to extend the setting of Orion's belt. As it sets, it would align itself on an east-west direction, as those three little pyramids, in the time of 10,500 BC. Cannot be another coincidence. But still, let's keep an open mind. Here is how they lock pyramids with stars on an equal scale, a cosmic landscape on the ground taking shape in 10,500 BC. Here are other monuments, and our little friend the Sphinx here. If what we were saying, what you've been told now is correct, then surely it must incorporate another prominent monument in the necropolis of Giza, the Great Sphinx. It is integrated in the design, and yet here is the odd thing. Inasmuch as the pyramids were directed with obsession along the meridian, the whole effort to draw our attention to the passage of Orion's belt at the meridian, the Sphinx was directed precisely due south. A lion-bodied, human-faced monument, looking as old as time, as old as the beginning, looking at what due east? I leave the question hanging for my co-author and friend Graham Hancock, who will take it up and close this matter once and for all, proving that the Giza necropolis is a marker of Genesis, a marker for all of us to decipher that establishes a date, a very important date, with a very interesting conclusion. Thank you very much.